Hi everyone, welcome. Welcome to Bite-Sized Cooking Tips with our beloved chef Carole. My name is Wendy Sachs. I'm on the board of Plant Powered Metro New York. For those of you who don't already know, Plant Powered Metro New York is a not-for-profit in New York City that empowers people to find better health, reverse chronic disease, and achieve and maintain their health through whole food, plant-based nutrition. So welcome. We have a monthly cooking show on Sundays, and before that comes our bite-sized cooking tips. So Carole, what are the tips for today?
Oh, thank you, Wendy, for your introduction, and happy that all of you are here. And today it's all about spices. Mostly dry spices, nothing about fresh spices, fresh herbs, but everything is dried. And the most important thing that I just want to tell you is that people want to always store and present their spices right by the stove. You know, one, for convenience, and two, because if you have a lot of them, people like to display them above the stove or in a drawer right next to the stove. And it's something that you really shouldn't be doing, actually. My tip is to tell you that you want to always keep them in a dark, cool spot, okay? Because any kind of light that is going to get to your spices is just going to age them quicker, and they're going to lose their flavor, okay? So that's my first and foremost. And how long do spices last? Well, I would say that the dried herbs and the ground spices can last for about a year, actually. And anything that is whole. And what would be a whole spice? I'm going to say a nutmeg, you know, something like this is considered whole, okay? So those kinds of whole spices, like a cardamom pod or a coriander seed that's whole, can last up to 3 years. So that's quite some time. And I also want to say that I have probably a good 60 spices, maybe 75. I'm not sure. I've never made a count. But today I want you to know that I think that there are about 25 essential spices for you to have. And I'm not going to list all of them. We're going to have them posted in the chat, and we're going to run them along the bottom of the feed here so that you can see what I think are the 25 spices that you need. And that's just the basics, okay? And 25 is not a lot, okay? Again, remembering that in some times you need to have the whole and you need to have the ground. So let's just say it's cinnamon. It's really nice to have the cinnamon ground powder, but sometimes you might need cinnamon sticks, okay? And then sometimes with cumin, you might want cumin ground, but you also have to have cumin seed, because really, even though it's the same flavor, sometimes there's really a time when you want to use a cumin seed. And if you're cooking with low sodium or no salt whatsoever, you want to have these kinds of spices that are going to bring up the flavor in your food, okay? So the other point that I want to make is when you have these 25 spices, it allows you to make up your own blend, okay? And what does that mean, make up your own blend? Well, we all know about Italian seasoning, right? That's a blend of certain spices, right? It's a blend of basil, oregano, thyme, marjoram, and sometimes you want to have that already made up. So if you're making a dressing or you're making something Italian, you can just go right to your blend. So I have in a few jars, I have a few blends that I really love. I have a Cajun mix that I love. I have a garam masala when I've made it myself. And then I have a spice that I love that I'm going to show you how I make today. I actually call it carnitas because I don't know, 100 years ago, ages ago, when I actually ate meat, carnitas was a way of braising meat in a kind of a Mexican spice. But really, I don't eat any meat anymore for a very long time, but I tend to call it a carnita spice, but it really is a Mexican blend. And I use it a lot. In fact, sometimes I actually take it with me on a travel trip. If I'm going, out of town and I think, oh, what will I need? Maybe I'll take it a spice or two with me. And I just want to show you that I use these little bags. They're just 2 by 3 inches. You get like 175 bags in a little box. And I take these bags, well, for my vitamins sometimes, but it's really good for spices. So then I label it with a Sharpie and I say garam masala, or I say Old Bay spice, or Italian seasonings. And this year when I traveled for almost a whole month, like at the end of last year, and I was going to be doing cooking demos, I must have bought like 20 packets of these little spices with me. And it kind of just made me feel like I could cook anything, anywhere I was. And if I was upstate New York, I went last summer and I was just like, oh, I'll just bring the carnita spice, because whatever we eat, it's going to be delicious on a corn salad, or it's going to be delicious on kale and mushrooms. So the little blends are really helpful to have. So I encourage you to make blends. And if you wonder, how do I make a blend? I don't have a recipe. Well, I just suggest you go to Google and you just say, how do you make a curry spice? And there are many variations of a curry spice, but you'll find one and you'll see that having the essential spices, you'll use a little bit of all the essential spices to make your curry. The other important thing that I want to tell you is having one of these. And this is a small coffee grinder, okay? And I find it essential. It's not very much money. You never use it for coffee. You only use it just for spices, okay? And today I realized I needed coriander, and now you can buy ground coriander already ground, but if you knew the smell of coriander and how amazing the aroma is, you would just get coriander seed, okay? And earlier today, I actually spilled all of it all over my counter. It was a little bit of a disaster. But coriander seed is very small. And what I do is I have a spice jar here of whole coriander. And what I do is I grind it fresh, but I don't grind a lot of it. So I get a little piece of saran wrap, and this is my little tip here for you, is I actually just grind, there's probably a good 1/3 of a cup here, right? And when I wash this out, I don't put it in the sink. I just take a sponge or a paper towel, and I always just damp using it, very carefully, and then I dry it out, and then it goes back on the shelf, okay? But I do this with my flaxseed as well. I don't grind a ton of flaxseed. I just grind a little bit so that everything stays whole. And then what I do is I take this and I actually kind of just bundle it up and I kind of tie it up like this, and it will sit on top right in the jar like that. And I just put it in there, and that way when I need the coriander, it's already ground, and I probably have enough for a couple times. And then the rest of it kind of stays whole, and that keeps it very, very, very fresh. Okay, so I thought that the other tip that I want to tell you is it's nice to have all your jars looking the same, okay? I know that you probably run to the store and say, oh, I need this for this recipe, and you end up buying one spice at a time, and then you end up with all these different size jars and things looking, kind of just like a mess. I just would like to encourage you to get some kind of jar. You can recycle old jars, which is what I do. I recycle some of these older spice jars, and I actually label everything on the top. Okay, it just depends on how you're viewing your spices. If they're all on a row, you can, label them on the face. But the way that I store mine are on like a shelf, so I have everything labeled on the top. Okay, and I find that using one of these chalk markers on this black lid works really, really nice. And when I run out of the jars that I have, I just take an old jar that also has a black lid, trying to keep everything unified, and then write with the chalk marker on the top. Okay, so I do have a few, I will admit that I have some spices in a few bags, but I really try to get everything into their jars, and also the jars look like they all match and they go together. Otherwise, you're looking at like chaos. And as you know, I like a lot of order, and organization really helps. We're going to make our Mexican spice blend, and I want to show you the way that I like doing it. And this is a spice blend that I use all the time. Wendy's going to put the blend, the amounts in the chat box, but we'll go through it really slowly. So I need 1 teaspoon of cumin, and I'm using the ground cumin, okay? So I put that 1 teaspoon there. The next thing is, it says 2 teaspoons of coriander. Okay, so again, we just ground that a few minutes ago. And remember, I have the little bag. And we're going to take 2 teaspoons out of this. So I go 1, and then I actually put the second one right next to it, okay? Now you're going to see my little logic of what I'm doing here. Again, we're going to tie this up, and we're going to just put this back. And I always put the lids on right away. You always want your jars to be completely sealed. Okay, and then we need paprika. We need a half a teaspoon of paprika, of smoked Spanish paprika. So I'm going to put that there. Okay, and then we need a half a teaspoon of oregano. Okay, and you're going to see I'm not rinsing the spoon. I'm not doing anything. Okay, a half a teaspoon of oregano goes there. We need 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper. Okay, so let's just get our black pepper out. And you can see that I'm slowly building this plate and this blend. And then we need a half a teaspoon or more of chipotle powder. Now I have fresh that I ground. I ground a real pepper, and I'm almost at the end. It's a tiny little jar. It's super strong. And it says that we need a half a teaspoon, but I always hold back a little bit. So I'm just going to put a 1/4 teaspoon, okay? And then the last thing we need is chili powder. And the chili powder is 1 to 2 teaspoons. And I'm just going to use 1 teaspoon, okay? And let's just see how we have that. Okay, now the reason that I've put all the spices all laid out like this and doing one thing at a time, and I do this in the bowl as well when I'm making anything, because often we get a phone call, or we get distracted by our children, or we just walk away from what we're doing and then we don't know where we are. So this tip of just laying things out, if you get interrupted, you immediately can go back and say, oh, I did the 2 teaspoons of coriander. Oh, I did it, the cumin. So I really like this way. And you'll see when you watch my demos that I do this all the time. I do it with the baking soda, the baking powder. I do it with the flaxseed. I put things into the bowl so that I can always know exactly where I am, because we all get distracted. So then what happens with this blend, and dried herbs, I always try to give it a little rub, often between my hands like this. Just to kind of open up the smell. And then you just want to, usually I would do all this in a bowl, but I did it on a plate so you could really see. And then all this just gets really mixed up, okay? And then you get your jar, and then you just pour it in, okay? And you might say, how do I get all this powder neatly into my thing? I'll just show you. You could do it with a paper towel, but honestly, I have a piece of paper here, and I'm literally just going to pour all of this onto the piece of paper, just like this, okay? And then, again, you could do it with a paper towel, and I'm literally just going to pour everything into this jar right there. And we got our mixture of spice. So this way, when I'm going to go eat a burrito, or I want to sprinkle kale or mushrooms or whatever, I have the spice already made. So that's pretty much our tip for the day. We have a Sunday demo, which will connect a lot of what we're doing today into that Sunday demo. So I look forward to seeing you then. And Wendy, it's back to you. If we have any questions, I don't know.
We do, and thank you so much. One of the things I love about what you do is not just show your cooking tips, but you always put in a bit of kitchen organization. And one thing that I've loved, because we know my spices are organized by you like that, is it's super easy when you're really running low to see it in those jars, where some of the store-bought jars, you don't necessarily know how low you're going. So in those clear jars, you really know when you need to run to the store and replace them. We have a question.
Yes, that's a very good point. And I have really oversized jars. But I know, Wendy, when we did your spices, we went to Penzies, and they have a lot of kinds of jars online. And you just pick, normal size spice jars are skinnier, and mine are just twice the size because I actually go through things pretty quickly. So I just like to have things on hand. But I do really encourage all of you not to have a mishmash of all those different kinds of bottles. And if you're just going to use the bottles, try to find the brand that you like and just buy that brand for, the next 20 times. And if you end up buying some weird off, something that doesn't match, then save the old jar so that you can, use that old jar that belongs to that set. So everything looks unified. Okay.
Excellent. And we do have a question, which is fresh basil from a live plant better than using the dried basil?
Well, everything is always better fresh, I will tell you. I mean, there are times especially if you're not eating with salt, okay? Because we have to be very creative in trying to bring up those flavors, right? We'll be making a soup on Sunday, and I felt it kind of like I didn't know what to do to bring it up besides lemon, but a little pinch of cayenne was perfect. So back to the basil question, always fresh herbs are just so much better. But there are times when you do need to use dried basil that you don't use. So, and often fresh basil is only around for the summer or the early spring. So, unless you're growing something indoors. So, you have to have the dried basil. And it's not, is one better than the other? I think you just have to know when to use one or the other.
Excellent. And do you have a tip of when to put in the fresh basil? In other words, I think you've mentioned to me put in your fresh herbs towards the end, right?
Yes, and honestly, all summer long, and I've just gone through a huge harvest of my own tomatoes, and I've been making sauce, and I've been putting in a lot of fresh basil. But if I didn't have that fresh basil, believe it or not, I would absolutely be using dried basil. So, and it's fine to use the dried basil, but if you have the fresh basil when you're making sauce, of course, it's just going to be extra special. Even when you get a can of tomatoes, often it will say with basil. And what does that mean? It doesn't mean that it's got basil dried. It's actually got leaves in the tomato sauce.
Excellent. That's our question for today. Just a reminder to everyone, first, thanks for joining us for these bite-sized tips. Please join us on Sunday at 5 o'clock on your YouTube or Facebook channel. If you want the recipes for Sunday, do register at the plantpoweredmetronewyork.org website. I've put that in the chat. And also a quick announcement, we have a 21-day jumpstart coming up. That's 21 days where you can be guided on your transition from maybe a standard American diet or some other way of eating into a whole food plant-based diet. We will be showing you the science, the evidence, the how-tos, the behavior change modifications. It's really a plethora of opportunity to make these changes and start on or renew your path to health. So please join us, and I will also put the Jumpstart information in the chat. And to reach Chef Carole, you can reach her on Instagram or see her beautiful pictures on Instagram at The Veggie Vanguard. And Carole can be reached on her email. Sorry, the Instagram is at The Veggie Vanguard. The symbol at The Veggie Vanguard. And email is Carole with an E at theveggievanguard.com. So I will put that in the chat. I was trying to do that and talk at the same time. So please join us. Look forward to seeing you Sunday. And for those who are interested, go to the Plant Powered Metro New York website to find out more about the Jumpstart. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Wendy.